so fun, you guys. I'm so happy to have you here. We're going to have a wonderful time all together. Just to introduce myself formally, my name is Charlotte. I'm here with Foodcraft, and I am so excited to be bringing this recipe to all of you. The spirit of Coquito is to be shared. So we have our own recipe here, and we're going to be sharing it with all of you. Now, the best part about this is that nothing is set in stone. It's not an exact science. This is what we have found is the most delicious version for us, but we encourage you all to kind of tweak and eyeball and have fun with this recipe just because it's really the spirit of the drink itself. It's from Puerto Rico, and every family has their own recipe, and so this is our Foodcraft family. We're going to be sharing it with all of you. It's meant to be shared with friends, and so we're so excited to do this today. Now, as far as Coquito is concerned, it's actually drank around the holiday season. So we're already doing something that's a little bit less traditional. But that being said, there are so many foods that I wish I had all year round, and I always wonder why we keep them to certain times of the year. So I hope that you guys are ready to have a little bit of holiday taste. We are going to be making the Coquito in a minute, but before we do, let's talk about it a little, right? So for me personally, I actually had not tasted it until quite recently. It has changed my life, everybody. I knew I would like it because I love eggnog. Now, eggnog is a very similar flavor profile. However, eggnog has eggs and cream and all kinds of stuff like that in it, which is super duper delicious. But Coquito is kind of a variation on eggnog that has a bit of Caribbean influence. It actually has coconut in it to kind of just balance it a little bit with some tropical flavors. So we're going to get into our little recipe in a minute, but what I want to make sure everybody understands is how loved Coquito is. It's something that actually has its own national day on December 21st of every year. It's National Coquito Day. And as I mentioned, everybody's recipe is a little bit different. And so there's also contests annually to kind of taste test everybody's and see who has the best recipe. So we're going to see how we stack up today. Now, the first thing I want to mention is that Coquito is something that can be served either with alcohol or without it. So for us today, we're going to be building a nice simple base. This is going to be the virgin version. However, we are going to tell you guys how you can spice it up a little bit if you wanted to add alcohol. Now, on our recipe, there is a QR code in your kit. You can scan it. That will have the recipe in it. There'll also be a link in our chat box to it. We did mention that if you wanted to use alcohol, it's best when infused. So if you wanted to add some white rum to this recipe, you certainly can. Now, we've given you a couple of things inside of your kit that you can use as an infusion. So the first thing is going to be our raisins. Believe it or not, raisins are a very traditional way to kind of sweeten up your alcohol and give it some of that dark sugary flavor. So if you wanted to steep some raisins in your white rum, you can. Now we've also provided some cinnamon sticks. These are not only beautiful, they also pack a punch of cinnamon flavor. So if you wanted to just kind of pour some of your alcohol, about 3/4 of a cup, into a jar or a closed container, you can just kind of knock in a couple of raisins, a few cinnamon sticks. If you have other things around that you want to throw in, maybe some star anise or some cloves, you can. And then if you leave it to steep for at least an hour, you'll notice that it starts to take on this wonderful color. So I personally love coconut rum. I love it a lot. I always have. This is a secret between you and me. I really like coconut rum. And so I have some in here steeping with my raisins and my cinnamon stick. Now you can do this for just about an hour and you will take on some of the flavor, but if you really want to deepen it, I recommend doing it a day or two in advance. This was actually done 2 days ago, so this is ready to be used. I'm going to have some a little bit after this class, maybe tonight. I'll just kind of indulge in some lovely coconut rum in my coquito that we make together today. So if you wanted to do that, I highly recommend that you do. It's just so simple, and it's a nice little way to personalize it too, because if you don't like rum and you want to use whiskey or something like that, you can. In fact, I know that we have some judgment about Fireball in our world. Maybe you have some bad memories, but you know what? It actually is so delicious in here. I would recommend trying things like that out just for fun, So for our base, we're going to first talk about our little ingredients that we have here. So we have a couple of things. Your kit was very heavy, you'd notice, because it has lots of cans in it. So I'm going to be panning down my camera and I'll show you guys what we have here. So we have a couple of different things and I'll tell you about their use in our recipe. So these are our cans that we're going to be using. You'll notice I've already opened mine. This was something that I made sure to do because the hardest part of today is going to be opening your cans. It's very, very difficult sometimes to use can openers. I don't know. So if you want to just crack those open as soon as you can, it might be a good move. Now we have 4 things here. This is going to be our coquito base. So the first thing that we have is a little bit of evaporated milk right here. Now this is something that is used in lots of different recipes, believe it or not. It has a very big prevalence in a way that you might not understand yet because it's a little bit of an underrated ingredient. Now in our coquito, it's going to be adding a bit of a darker flavor, and it will also just kind of round out the texture a little bit. Now, the reason why I say that is because evaporated milk is super good at staying a liquid. Even amongst these kind of heavy, richer ingredients, it's not going to solidify, it's not going to do anything funky or separate because our evaporated milk is going to keep it together. Believe it or not, evaporated milk is also a secret ingredient in most quesos because when you've ever had queso and it's really, really good when it's hot and then it gets super duper solid when it's not, the reason why that happens is because it doesn't have evaporated milk in it. Evaporated milk is going to keep everything fluid. And so this is a really good ingredient to have in your coquito. Now we also have sweetened condensed milk over here. Now our sweetened condensed milk, it really, really packs a punch. I invite you to taste these things on their own before we actually mix it all together. But as far as the sweetened condensed milk goes, this is where our sugar and a lot of that richness is going to come from. Now we aren't even going to be using this whole can. We'll use about half of it, but this is going to really pack a really sweet, delicious, creamy punch. So this is a very important ingredient here. Now, this is going to be a lot of that velvety smoothness, but on top of that, we're also going to be working with coconut. Now, coconut has a lot of plant-based velvety smoothness, and so there are even recipe variations that are vegan of coquito. So these are both dairy products, but these here are coconut. Now, coconut can be used in this recipe, and in fact, it's a traditional component, but if you wanted to use other plant-based milks in kind of addition to the coconut, you could make a vegan coquito for your vegan friends. So we're going to be using both coconut milk and coconut cream. Now, coconut milk is a little bit less rich than coconut cream is, so we're going to be using both of them. Now, some recipes only use one or the other. We find that using a combination really gets the perfect texture. So as far as our coconut milk is concerned, it's a little bit lighter, and it's going to kind of give us something that really works with the decadence rather than working against it. Whereas if we were to use all coconut cream, you might end up with something that was a little too rich. So we've used half and half. We find that this is the best way to make really good coquito. So these are kind of all the ingredients that we'll need for our base. You can see it's very, very simple. Now we're also going to be seasoning this. Of course, we need some flavor. Now we're going to be doing that with some nutmeg and some cinnamon. I have it in a little bowl right here. Now, as far as these spices are concerned, nutmeg is the most traditional. That's true of eggnog too. But if you wanted to add some additional seasons, you can also go ahead and go for cinnamon. I definitely love the addition of cinnamon here. And you can also use things like cloves or even ginger would be delicious, specifically with the coconut. I think those flavors go very well. That might also bring you to that Caribbean flavor profile. So there's lots of different ways that you can spice this up, but we're going to be using nutmeg and cinnamon today. Now, we also have provided a bit of imitation vanilla in your kit. I have some vanilla right here pre-measured in my little bowl. I measure vanilla with my heart, and so we'll get into that in a moment. Our recipe calls for just a little bit, but we might go ahead and add a little more. I don't know, be crazy. If you have some type of special vanilla extract at home, you can use that too. I went through a big phase where I was using vanilla bean paste all the time, so if you have something like that, you can feel free to use that as well. So these are all of the things that we're going to need for our recipe. Believe it or not, that's it. It's very, very simple. And what's really nice about it is that because all of these ingredients are shelf stable, the coquito itself can last in your fridge for up to 6 weeks. It lasts a very long time. And the flavor also gets better and better over time. So you'll notice that as you leave it in the fridge, the nutmeg flavor kind of develops in the fat of the coconut milk, and it kind of brings on this very rich, velvety, smooth flavor that does kind of bring me to the holiday season. So it's sort of nice here in July when it's a little bit sweaty out to just kind of reminisce about how wonderful the holidays can be. So we're going to get into our recipe now. I have a couple of little tips and tricks along the way. Now, I've mentioned this before, but this is totally safe to eyeball. However, I am going to be measuring out our ingredients just to keep things consistent. So if you'd like to use your eyeballs, you can. If you'd like to measure along with me, you can also do that. Now, my first tip to you is to start with the sweetened condensed milk. Sweetened condensed milk is very heavy. It's going to sink to the bottom. And so it's nice to just kind of put it in the first place. So my other tip about sweetened condensed milk is that it can be very sticky and heavy, which makes it sort of difficult to pour into your measuring cup and then into your blender. You're going to find that you lose a lot of it once you're moving it between all of these containers. And so the best thing to do is to go a little at a time. We're not even going to measure this one. And to my question in the chat box, not quite. We don't need the whole can. But you are going to be using a blender of your own, of course. And so if you have a small blender, you might want to make a smaller portion of the recipe. And if you do have a larger blender, my friend, you can use the whole thing. It's up to you. Our recipe is available in the link in the chat box. And so if you wanted to refer to that, you could always double it, you could quadruple it, or you could lessen it depending on what you have at home as far as your blender is concerned. So why don't we start by just adding in about 7 ounces of our sweetened condensed milk. Now, the sweetened condensed milk comes in a can that is 14 ounces, and so you're going to need to use half of it. This is going to be the easiest to eyeball anyway, so I'm going to take the lid off of my blender. You'll notice that my blender is yellow. It's from 1985. It was a wedding gift for my parents. She still works like a charm, but I've got her right here to make my coquito today. So we're going to be adding in half of your can of sweetened condensed milk. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and pour that in. Ooh, you can really see how rich it is. Okay, so we just need half of it. With this other half, you can store it very easily. I would just recommend taking it out of the can to store it. Sometimes when you store things inside of the can, they take on a very metallic flavor. And so I would recommend moving it into a Tupperware or some other type of airtight container, keeping it in your fridge and using it within the week. So if you have a recipe with sweetened condensed milk, you can make all kinds of wonderful, delicious, sweet things. I would recommend doing it within the week, or you could always just make more coquito. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is use our lovely little evaporated milk over here. Now, the evaporated milk we are going to measure. You'll notice that the amount of the can is a lot more than what we're actually going to need, and so it's a bit harder to eyeball. Now, we only need 2 ounces, so I'm going to be using my little measuring cup here, which happens to have ounces and cups. So I'm going to go ahead and give it 2 ounces, which, if you're using cups, is 1/4 of a cup. Okay, so just 2 ounces. Now you can already notice that evaporated milk has this really nice creamy color. Evaporated milk is actually milk without the water in it, and this is why the color gets concentrated and so does the flavor. Now what's nice about evaporated milk is not only that quality that's going to keep everything really velvety and smooth and light, it's also its flavor. It's a little bit deeper. When you do evaporate out the water, you also kind of enrich the sugar. The sugar gets a little bit malted, it gets a little bit brown, a little bit toasty tasting, and that's what's really nice about evaporated milk in this recipe. So not only does it have a good function, it also adds a lot of really nice flavor. So with your few little ounces, we just got 2 ounces, we're going to be adding this into our blender. Okay, let it drip. You want every last drop. I can't wait to drink this. Now, with our coconut milk and our coconut cream, you'll notice that they do look very similar. Coconut cream can be very, very thick and creamy. Now, that would be like if you've ever made a pina colada and you have used coco goya, something like that is a version of coconut cream that's very, very heavy. In fact, coco goya is almost like butter. It's very thick, it's almost spreadable. And so we're not going to be using that today. We want a lighter version. So we've chosen a coconut cream that packs all of the flavor, but is just a little bit lighter because I promise you this is still going to be quite decadent. So We're going to be using 7 ounces of each. So let's start with that. Now, for my friend who's asking about the servings, it does make quite a few servings. I would say that you will have at least 4 big glasses of coquito by the end of this. However, you do have enough ingredients to double it if you wanted to make more for your friends, or even if you wanted to make less. The numbers are pretty easy to cut, and of course, you can eyeball most of it. So we're going to take 7 ounces of our coconut milk now. 7 ounces is just less than 1 cup. Okay. So now we're going to be pouring this into our blender as well. Just like that. It already looks so creamy, so nice and decadent. I'm a huge ice cream person. It's just one of my main food groups, to be honest. So I really like anything similar. And in fact, coconut is my favorite flavor. So I am a big believer in this recipe, and I'm very excited to share it with everybody. And now you'll notice that the coconut cream is just a bit thicker, still very pourable though. Okay. And this is going to be the last thing that we add to our blender. Look at us go. Okay, so now this is just going to get poured in with everything else right over the top. So you can really see how simple this is. Now I do have a little rubber spatula here, and I'm just going to use this to get the remainder out of my measuring cup, just because everything is kind of staying in there a little bit, sticking to the sides. So I'm going to do my best. You want every last drop. All right, there we go. So at this point, we have all 4 of our main ingredients in our blender. Just to review things one more time, you have your 7 ounces of sweetened condensed milk, which was about half of the can. We eyeballed that one just because it's a little bit sticky. It's kind of hard to move between containers. Now, we also have 7 ounces of our coconut cream. This was also roughly half of that can. So it's a really easy thing to kind of eyeball as well, but we did measure it just to be safe. Now, you should also have a couple of ounces of coconut milk. Now, our recipe calls for about 4, just a little bit less than the cream, but I like to up it to 7 just to have everything be really even and evenly incorporated. And then finally, you have 2 ounces of your evaporated milk. So we have a couple of different things going on in there, but they're all very delicious, and I can even smell it, and I'm very excited. I've already got my coquito senses tingling. So what we're going to do now is just give it that signature flavor. So as far as our signature flavor is concerned, this is where the spices come in. Now, if you would like to measure, you can. So it is going to be a 1/4 teaspoon of your ground nutmeg. And then I like to use at least a 1/4 teaspoon of my ground cinnamon. I have both of those in this little bowl. So I'm going to be knocking those in too. Just like that. And now, as far as the vanilla goes, one more time, measure with your heart. We say about a 1/4 teaspoon, but if you want to add a little bit more, I won't tell anybody. You can add upwards of a teaspoon, and it'll just kind of deepen that really nice toasty vanilla-y flavor. So go ahead and add that as well. Believe it or not, that's everything that we need to put in our lovely little blender from 1985. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to put the lid on there. Definitely make sure that you put the lid on before you blend it. And we are going to be blending. Now, for the blending portion of today, I am actually going to mute myself. She's very loud, and so I'm just going to make sure that I don't interfere with the sound too much, so I'll mute myself. But that being said, what I'm going to do is start on low, and then I'll raise it up to high once I notice that all of the color has become uniform. So at this point, you can see that there's kind of this sweetened condensed milk layer on the bottom, and then of course we have all of the other things sort of stacked up on top. Now, this is why I recommend recommended to put that one in first. And so we're going to be blending this until the color is uniform. Now, if you did want to put some ice in here and you have a blender that can handle ice, I would totally recommend it. If you just want to make it cold, that would be delicious. But if you wanted to make this into a slushie, that would be phenomenal. So if you want to do that, please let us know how it goes. I wish that my blender could make kind of slushy ice. I'm actually in the market for one of those because I love slushies. So for my friend in the chat, if you'd like to do that, we highly recommend it. However, I am going to serve mine over ice today. So what I'm saying about blending it is that our recipe calls for at least 30 seconds of blending. What I'm going to do is start it on low. Once the color is uniform, I'll turn it up to high. Now, the reason that I like to put it up to high is because I find that it kind of whips it a little bit. Because we have so much creamy, yummy, fatty things in here, when you whip it really hard and really fast, you end up with something that's a bit more aerated. Now, this not only makes the texture sort of foamy, it's kind of nice in the mouthfeel, it also elevates the flavor a little bit. So it kind of raises the flavor. It makes the nutmeg a little bit lighter. It just kind of carries everything a little bit better. So I personally really like mine to kind of spend some time in the blender. So I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to start on low. And then once I notice that uniform color, I'm going to turn it up to high.
All right, how are we all doing? If anybody has any questions, concerns, any doubts, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'm sure you guys are having a wonderful time. I love coquito, and I think you guys are going to love it too. Enjoy. Oh, good question. So you could add ice if your blender could handle it, but if not, it's okay. You don't have to, but if you want to, go ahead and make a slushy coquito, go for it.
Absolutely. And just know that my heart is with you because if I could make this a slushy coquito, I would, you know? So I think that sounds like a really, really good idea. Now I'm opening up my blender. And what I really implore that everyone does at this point is take a little sniff. It's very important. It smells so good. I can smell all of the ingredients. I smell the sweetened condensed milk and the evaporated milk and the coconut, but really I'm getting that lovely kind of spiced, almost holiday type of scent. It really brings you to that place when you have that nutmeg smell. Honestly, it kind of brings me to pumpkin spice latte world, which I feel like is a dirty word in July, but I can kind of get that feeling from this. It really brings me over to that time of year. So it smells really, really delicious. Now, the thing is, this is best when it is cold. I think that it tastes the best. It really kind of lets the flavors meld and be a little bit better just because it gives it time in the fridge to just kind of come together a little bit. Like I said, the nutmeg really opens up in the fat of the coconut, and you really are able to taste that flavor in a well-rounded, smooth way. However, I do think that we should definitely taste this now. So what I'm going to say is that even though it is pretty tasty when it's cold, if you weren't able to blend yours with ice, I would go ahead and grab a glass with some ice. So I'm going to do that myself. I'm going to run over to my freezer and I'm going to fill up a little glass with ice, and we're going to be able to have a nice little taste test. So I'm going to go grab my cup and my ice, and we'll be right back. Okay, so for me personally, I'm calling in from Long Island where it is pretty sweaty. And so I filled up my glass with a good amount of ice, and I'm quite excited. I've been looking forward to this all day long. So I'm really, really ready to pour myself a nice little glass of my hard work. So let's go ahead and add this on in. Pour very carefully. Okay, you guys, so I have it on in there. I'm even going to take the little extra step. I'm going to use my spoon. And I'm just going to give this a bit of a toss in here. Now, this is going to help things to get really nice and cold. And it's also going to lighten up the flavor just a little bit. Adding a little bit of ice when it's in this phase kind of incorporates a bit of water into this nice drink, and it can help with a bit of the initial decadence before it actually melds in the fridge. When it's a little bit colder, it kind of helps to cut through the decadence, and so the ice also helps in that way. So I'm going to put my little cup back up here. And we're going to take a sip together. So, for those of you who have made this along with me, I implore you to have a nice little sip here. Mm. It's so good. It tastes so good. So I hope that you guys really like it. Now, I noticed a question here. If you did have the alcohol, I would say, let's see, when would you add it? So as far as when you could add it goes, you can kind of add it into glasses rather than adding it into the batch. Sometimes adding it into the batch can make things separate, and it would be a little bit unfavorable. You'd have to stir it a lot, all that kind of stuff. Unless you're going to drink it immediately, I would put it into the glass. Now, the amount is really up to you. Half a shot, one shot, anything like that would be okay. I would just kind of play around with the quantities, but I would definitely add it in the glass. Now, if you wanted to get really crazy, you could shake it. This would also help to aerate it a little bit. And then, of course, you'd be able to incorporate the alcohol very well, just because this is quite a thick liquid. And so sometimes it can be difficult to add the alcohol in evenly. So I would recommend maybe shaking it if you're feeling very, very fancy. Yeah, it is really, really yummy. I see some people in the chat saying that it tastes delicious, and I totally agree. It really is so good. Now, as far as this is concerned, you'll notice that you do have quite a bit of it. I mentioned earlier that you can probably get 4 good-sized portions out of here. And so what I will say is that it does last very long in the fridge, as we mentioned, but traditionally coquito is something that's meant to be shared, like we mentioned. So if you wanted to bottle it and share it with your friends, you could do that very easily. Maybe if you're seeing anybody special tomorrow, you can share this with them, especially if you put just a little bit of alcohol in it, just to kind of make it really special and fun. So as far as storage goes, I've already kind of mentioned that if you would like to save your other ingredients, maybe you want to make more coquito, but not today, you can just kind of put them into separate containers. I would definitely recommend that over trying to put the can into your refrigerator. Sometimes if you were to put it into that can, it does end up with that disappointing metallic flavor, and you just don't want that in your coquito. So you can just put them into airtight containers. That's a really good way to store them in your fridge. Most of them will last a very, very long time, just because they are shelf stable. However, like I already mentioned, I would find a recipe to throw them in over the next week or so. Maybe you'll make some very special queso with your evaporated milk. Who knows? So this was super duper fun and very, very delicious. I'm going to be putting this into a pitcher in my refrigerator. I'm going to let it kind of steep overnight along with the alcohol that I've been steeping. And tomorrow is going to be really, really fun. So I hope that you loved this. I hope that you enjoy. When I do put this into a pitcher, I'm going to put a little bit of saran wrap over the top until tomorrow, just to make sure that I keep the air out of it. Now, one thing I will say is that when you revisit your coquito, it might look a little bit different when you get into the refrigerator. Sometimes it solidifies a bit. And so all you need to do is either shake it if you have a lid on, or you can just stir it really well just to reincorporate things. So that's all you really need to know about the magic of coquito. I hope that you had a super wonderful time. I definitely did. It was so nice to interact with you guys today. It was really, really wonderful to share our recipe with you. Remember how free you can be with this one. If you have anything that you'd like to add to it, you totally can. And if you're like me and you're going to be adding your infused coconut rum, then cheers to you. I hope that you had a really, really wonderful time. And thank you all so much for being here. Now, the very last thing we're going to do is hear from Tatiana one more time. So I am going to pass it off to her in a moment. But from the bottom of my foodcraft heart, thank you guys so much for giving me the space to do this with all of you. Thank you so much for having me, and have a wonderful holiday and summer.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was such an awesome, awesome instructor, and she is someone that really, really did such a fantastic job. Thank you so much for walking us through this wonderful process of making coquito. If anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to throw them in the chat. For right now, I'm going to be sending you guys a couple of links. If you guys have any feedback, any suggestions, any ideas, whatever you guys want, feel free to throw them into our feedback link. And also, if you guys want to follow us on Instagram, We have lots of cool posts every day. There's always something new. You can participate in anything. There's some activities that we have on there. There's also some questions if you want to go ahead and answer some questions on our stories. And you could also see any upcoming events on our Instagram. So if you want to stay updated, follow us. Also, if you guys would be interested in learning a little bit more about other opportunities to get involved, please click on the Crafter community events, just like this one. There's going to be many more events up in the upcoming future. And I'm going to share my screen really quick so that you guys can see what is coming up for August. So in August 7th, we're also going to have a free workshop. So mark your calendars. We're also going to be interacting with some llamas on September 4th. So please do join us and bring your family to join us as well. The kids, the cousins, the dogs, they're going to be super excited to see some llamas on the screen. So please do join us. And also, we have some really exciting news for the holiday season of 2024. We're going to have a really cool event. And so I'm going to be clicking next, and you're going to really get that vibe of what it is to be connected to food craft during the holidays. So let's take a look. Oh my goodness, I love those llamas. No matter how many times I see that slide, I can't help but dance and groove with those llamas. They are too cute. I love them. I love them. I love them. And last but not least, if you enjoyed our event today and you would like to do this every month with your colleagues, with your teammates, with your family, sign up for our premium virtual event subscription and you will be able to do this every month. Why not?